welcome to Procurement Pivots, the podcast for procurement professionals wanting to navigate change successfully and create career success on your own terms. I'm Donna Bowden, procurement career coach and founder of Narrate Your Career.
And I'm Laura Sellers, executive coach for procurement and founder of Coaching for Procurement. And between us, we bring almost 25 years of supporting and working with procurement professionals. And it's fair to say we've navigated many of our own career pivots along the way. And now we're here to help you do the same.
Each episode will share practical strategies, honest conversations, and expert insights to help you confidently tackle the changes and challenges in your procurement career.
Let's get started.
Hi everyone, welcome to our latest episode of Procurement Pivots. We're both really excited to be here with you again today. And today we're going to be talking about the topic of identity. And I feel there's probably going to be quite a bit to talk about on this one, Laura, isn't there?
A lot to unwrap.
So why don't you start then? Why have we chosen to talk about identity on today's topic?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's certainly a deep one. I feel like we can bring a few things out of these into subsequent episodes, to be honest. But I think as an overall thing, though, we can be so tied to our identity as professionals, as career-driven people, and that can be a really good thing. It can also be it can be something that fuels us, absolutely. It can be something that hinders us as well when it comes to achievement, when it comes to the high bar we set for ourselves, the high expectations that we have of ourselves and maybe of others as well. So it's definitely something that is worth unpacking and maybe creating some space between identity and what we do and who we are. So yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I think this is a topic that I think we probably both, in the work that we do, we're touching on this with our clients, but probably in quite different ways, I suspect. So I think it felt like a really relevant topic to talk about, just because it is so multifaceted. And it's actually quite complex, I think, when you start drilling down into it. But actually, it can totally shape how people are kind of feeling about themselves, and therefore, it can influence performance, like lots of different things. So I think it's going to be a great topic to talk about. I'm sure that we've got much more than one episode to discuss, but this is it's a good start point. So do you want to kick us off by kind of starting to kind of talk about what we've kind of spoken about in this area previously?
Yeah, and I guess a good place to start for procurement professionals in particular is that there is this thing around identity between being a procurement professional and the procurement identity as a whole. And the reason why this comes up a lot for me in my coaching sessions is that, for example, I could be working with somebody and they're dealing with a tricky stakeholder, and the stakeholder reacts to something that's happened and they just blame procurement. Procurement gets the finger of blame pointed at them for something or other. And a particular client I was working with found it quite hard to not take those things personally against them. So we really needed to do some work on separating the identity of themselves as an individual and the procurement process and about what had gone wrong, and creating that mental space. Because I think procurement in particular has an additional challenge when it comes to identity, because you've got this perception of procurement that can be a challenge in some organizations. So it's like you've got the hurdle of knowing your own professional identity and of who you are. And then you've got I work in procurement, either somebody doesn't know what that means, or they've got a perception of procurement that's not always favorable. And that, I've got examples where there's positive perceptions, don't get me wrong, it's not all negative, but it can be like an additional hurdle that somebody needs to overcome to really be their best at work.
Yeah, and I think going back to one of your earlier comments there, in the society that we live in today, I think so many people, they identify as their job title. It's kind of who are you as a person? Oh, I'm a head of procurement. But actually that's your job title. It's not necessarily your your full identity as a person. But particularly, I think, over the last few years, where we've seen there's been so much change out there, so much restructure, so many more people that have been affected by redundancy in procurement than I've ever seen previously. And I just think when we connect our job title to our real identity as a person, as an individual, like that redundancy just hits so much harder as well, because it's it really does feel like it's happened to you as a person. It's your position that's been made redundant. It's not you, but of course it's affected you as a person. But if you're suddenly then they're kind of, you've been working all these years, and you have defined yourself or identified as that, as that job title, and then all of a sudden you're not doing those things and you can't call yourself that person, then it, I think, can be really, really difficult to kind of navigate that period where you're maybe between roles. Or even, I think this applies, I've seen it where people have retired or taken a career break, and actually they then really struggle to kind of figure out, it's like, okay, well, I'm no longer doing that procurement role, like what's my purpose? So yeah, I think yeah, it's just such a fascinating topic, to be honest. But I think also yeah, the way we identify ourselves, like often we haven't always created that identity for ourselves. Like many people are, they're taking on other people's kind of description as their own, if that makes sense. And yeah, like sometimes, it could be kind of comments from your childhood, from your past, that you're carrying with you in later life and throughout your career. Why do you never speak up in class? And then, kind of as you've gone throughout your career, you kind of, you're taking that kind of status or that identity that, I am the person that doesn't speak up. I'm the person that's quiet in meetings. I'm the person that doesn't do these, because of sometimes it could just be a slightly a flippant comment, that's made, that you've taken and you've owned it as your own identity. So yeah, I think it can be really quite complex.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, especially after things like redundancy as well. It can be really hard to not take things like that personally, and to also, like you're saying, somebody's made a comment where you say, oh, you're so shy. You're so shy, so okay, so
Mm,
I'm not visible, and I think, like you say, we take on those labels that people give us. We take on labels that we give ourselves if we've got a poor self-worth, for example. And I think what you've said as well leads nicely into the topic of something that we work on a lot in coaching, which is beliefs, like limiting beliefs that hold us back, and beliefs that form part of who we are. So like you say, there are some things that we've carried with us for a long time. They're very sort of like rock solid beliefs. And they not just unhelpful ones, but helpful beliefs as well about who we
mm,
are and what we do. But they can, if we haven't got a good grasp of our identity in terms of purpose that we've covered before, we're going to cover values. We've got other things that build our confidence. If we don't have rock solid foundations there, those beliefs that we have can be exacerbated, or they can feed
mm,
the thoughts that we have in our head, leading to overthinking, leading to all those things. So it is a complex topic, and it's about recognizing where those beliefs come from. Is it, and again, we've said this before, is it ours? Is it somebody else's that we've let project
mm,
onto us? So it's definitely something that comes up a lot. And I think, when we've talked about this outside of the episodes, and about what we wanted to share today, we're saying that it might not be that we use the word identity in a coaching session, but it does come up a lot.
mm,
And I spend a lot of time saying be proud, and you'll see it on my content as well, like on LinkedIn and things, but where I say be proud to work in procurement, be proud of what you do, but it's not the whole identity of who you are. You're also
mm.
a person outside of your role.
Yeah,
So yeah, a lot of things around there, and like I say, beliefs are at the core of this, I think. What do you
yeah.
think?
And I think like coming back to that point that you said about understanding your positives, I think, is really important. Like, I think often people can cling on to those sometimes not positive beliefs or comments that have been made by other people. But I think leading with your strengths, your skills, things that you're really proud of, and building them into your self-created identity for yourself. Like for me, like where this comes in with the work that I do with my clients, a lot of the work I do with my clients is to help them to successfully position themselves, can be internally, externally, for whatever's next, could be a move, etc. And I think, when you're kind of considering how you want people to perceive you and how do you want to show up and how are you messaging yourself, like for me, like we have that choice of, what is it that we want to be known for, what is it that we want to show people, almost like, how is it that we want others to see us, like when they're meeting us for the first time. And so yeah, I think just remembering and recognizing all of those positives and those strengths when you're kind of building that profile or that personal brand for yourself, or even, when you're just thinking about, like, intentionally, like, how am I going to show up in that next meeting, that board meeting, that, that first meet with a new stakeholder, etc. It's kind of, just really thinking about, I guess how you want to show up, and what is the consistent message that you want to be giving to people.
There's definitely something around consistent messaging, but I want to throw a spanner in the works now and talk about when it comes to how others see us, because we can put a lot of effort into our identity and deciding how we're going to show up. We're not necessarily in control of how others see us. So don't get me wrong, there's lots of things we can do that are positive, that are that fuel who we want to be and how we want to show up. But when it comes to identity and those labels that you touched on earlier on, I think there's a lot of value in detaching ourselves from those labels. Because we can do all this work, we can decide how we're going to show up. We then take courage to take an action, and we realize that we've done all this work, and the other people who have given us those labels don't see it right away. And that can make us want to give up and think, well, it wasn't worth it. So in a procurement context, I think this is really valuable, because procurement can do all this work to evolve itself, to get the function to where it needs to be, and that tricky stakeholder still doesn't see it because they've got this rigid, fixed idea of what you were back then. And even taking it out of a work context, I could have somebody say to me, oh, you were like this as a kid, and it's like, well, yeah, I was a kid, that was 30 years ago. So, so I think it's just around being able to recognize that gap between identities, that other people's perceptions, you can't control them fully because they're looking through their own lens and their own memories, and they even might not have done this work on themselves. So I think while there's definitely a lot of value in all this work that we're doing, we can't put that identity fully in the hands of others. We need to own that identity for ourselves, regardless of whether everybody will see the change. What do you think?
I understand the point. I think you're right. Like we can influence our own behavior. We can totally influence how we choose to show up. And I do think, some of that can influence others, but we can't control. We can influence, but we can't fully control that. But what we can control is how we choose to, think about ourselves, how we choose to take actions, how we choose to speak up or not speak up, or present ourselves in, everyday interactions. Like they're the choices that we can make, and they're the things that are totally within our control. And I think, often that will influence some others' perception. But I think, really you need to own your action and your own belief. And the rest will kind of happen. But you can't kind of fully control how others, but you can influence it, I think.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. So I think, where I was coming from with that is that it's not all fruitless. Some people will see the change, right? But I
Mhm.
think putting all our eggs in one basket. I love metaphors, don't I? I've noticed this with these, I keep coming up with these weird phrases, right? But basically putting all of that recognition and that validation in the eyes of others who've given us those labels in the first place. I think, we need to just make sure we're balancing that recognition with our own recognition, with our own self.
Yeah.
So, because everybody we can absolutely influence. I think if we stay in our lane and if we focus on, well, what can I do? What you were saying, the action, okay, this is the label I've been given. I'm taking action to solve it. And I will check in for that feedback and
Mhm.
see whether it influences. But also bearing in mind that it's not only that one person you need to prove wrong. It's,
Mm.
there are other people you can gain that influence with. And if you stay focused on that purpose that we were talking about
Yeah.
in another episode and focused on the identity that makes most sense to you,
Yeah.
then and showing up intentionally with that, I absolutely think you can influence, definitely. I think it's just not giving all that power away to other people to say, okay, yeah, that label I can take away from you again.
Yeah. And I
Mm.
think the other word that kind of springs to mind for me is just authenticity. It's
Mm,
like this is not about creating like a fake persona for yourself, like
absolutely
totally
not.
changing like who you are. This is about like being really considered to think about what is the best version of your authentic self and how do you want to how do you want to show that, what does that actually look like, and how can you really own those positives. Like I think often people, they forget, like I see it all the time with the clients that I'm working with, like they some of the time that they're often doing a really good job, but there are reasons why they're starting to question things. Maybe their confidence has been affected because of a series of things, and as a one-off incident sometimes. But I think often people don't allow themselves to recognize the great things that they do daily and the impact that they're having on people. And I think just having a real focus on those positives as well, and kind of making sure that when you are kind of creating this identity for yourself, rather than just accepting potentially the kind of the identity that maybe has been influenced by others, it's just make sure that it is it's balanced, and it's involving those kind of those really positive things that are unique to
Mm.
you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've all got strengths. And once we've done some work on that, we'll be able to see where we can employ them. And, you're absolutely right what you said earlier about authenticity. This is not about creating a new identity that is not aligned with who you are. It's just
Yeah.
about making sure you're leaning into the things that are going to fuel you, because we can create this intentionality, but if we've not got a self of a sense of self-worth and identity to fuel that when the going gets tough, when we slip up, when we come across another hurdle, then all that hard work and all that identity can sort of collapse. So I think I think identity gets reinforced by more than one thing. And it's
Mm.
and so it's identity by where we want to go. That's the strategic element, the purpose, the goals, but also it gets reinforced by the values that we hold and by the beliefs that we have, and they all work and off each other and they fuel each other. So, and I was thinking about this, about how when it comes to those beliefs and about the identity, about how often we mix up our own recognition and feedback that we get from others. So, for example, and I'll come back to a negotiation example again, like if a negotiation doesn't go to plan and you walk out of the room, and there's a difference in between saying to yourself, I'm a bad negotiator, I can't do this, I'm terrible at this,
Mm.
I am identity, versus that didn't go as well as it could have gone. What can I learn from this? What can I do better? What support can I get? And so there's a lot more self-compassion in that. None
Mm.
of us are perfect. We're all learning. We've all got things that we can learn more of. But I think there's a real difference between that I am not good at
Yeah.
versus I'd like to improve this. I'm good at this. I can get even
Mm.
better if.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really important to separate identity from what you do.
Mm. And I
So,
think that ties back again, kind of just going back to a previous episode that we did on, I think it was the self-reflection one actually, where, I think actually we were talking about, and you kind of raised the point of um, the difference between overthinking versus
mm,
that self-reflection. And I think that reframe that you've just kind of, mentioned, that I am bad at negotiating, like, that kind of is more in that kind of negative mindset, which
mm,
probably is going to lead to more overthinking. And it's not giving yourself the space to then think about, okay, well, how can I move forward from this in a positive way? How can I learn from this, and and take that learning for the next one, and and kind of get a different outcome next time.
mm.
So I think it's definitely kind of ties back to that point.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the identity thing, just like overall, when it comes to our personal identities, a lot of us do, if you identify as a high achiever and your career has always meant something to you, and then something happens and you lose that sense of identity, and you're 20 years into your career, for example,
Mm,
it's definitely worth exploring that, because we are not just our careers. My career means a lot to me. I'm very career driven,
mm,
but the identity that I hold now, as opposed to what I did when I was in house, is very different. And so I
mm,
think, our identities can evolve, but it's, when we've always been about the career and then something doesn't go to plan, then, it can really shake that sense of self-worth. And it just takes some tweaks to really sort of make sure that we're remembering that there are
mm.
other things that make up who we are.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and actually,
So,
just hearing you kind of talk about that, and I know this isn't necessarily going to be kind of relevant for a lot of people listening, that, I know we've got people listening that are also kind of running their own businesses, or, doing kind of self-employed type roles within the procurement
mm,
space. But, we're both working in the coaching space. And, I've definitely seen it that, a lot of other coaches, like, sometimes people, they'll identify themselves as a coach. Some people will identify themselves as a business owner. Some people will identify themselves as a coach and a business owner. And I know that kind of business owner mindset for me, that changes how I show up in the work that I do. And I think, actually, when you just think about the coaching side, you're thinking about how you help your clients. Whereas actually, when you've got that kind of label on yourself as like the business owner, you recognize that I'm going to have to do the marketing, the sales, the accounts, all of those other things that actually, if you just think about yourself as a coach, that you kind of, I think, almost thinking more about the delivery work with specific clients, as opposed to, like we've spoken about it lots of times before, like such a big part of what we do has to be in making sure that we're constantly visible and marketing ourselves, and that we've got a flow of clients that are able to find us and know what we do. So I think, yeah, that just kind of, rung true, because I think, for some people that is quite a big shift, going from,
mm.
almost like labeling themselves as the profession, rather than also as that business owner as well.
Yeah, I think that's just as relevant to coaches and business owners as it is to procurement professionals and growing a business within a business sometimes, and I think we, like you said, for part of running the business for us is not just about the delivery, it's also about how we get visible. And you could translate that directly to
Mm,
procurement. So there's the credibility about being good at procurement and what you do. And then there's the credibility with your stakeholders, who are going to be what needs you meet, being visible to them. And I actually think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from running a business that you could bring into procurement. And actually, there's a whole market out there of procurement professionals who now are business owners, and how they show up and what their identity is. They're no longer in-house, they're
mm,
external, and that can also shake identity. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely something that you have to really grab hold of with both hands, but be able to separate out, actually, that's not my identity. This is actually
mm.
something else.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And even just again, kind of whilst we were talking, but thinking about right now, there's probably a higher number of people that aren't in roles than what we've seen in previous times. And I think when you think about networking type events and you're meeting someone for the first time, like I've seen it so many times where someone said, "Oh, what do you do?" And that person has responded by saying, "I'm not working at the moment."
Mm.
That's their new identity. When actually, I think, when you really understand your true kind of identity and how you want to share that identity with other people, it's not about whether you're right now employed or not employed. It's like, actually, that person wasn't asking for your employment status. They're wanting to get an understanding of, maybe what your area of expertise is, and what specifically do you do within procurement. So I think even just how we're conveying our identity to other people can make such a massive, massive difference to then kind of potentially what opportunities that could lead to, like talking about that kind of networking scenario. Responding with I'm not working at the moment, that could end the conversation potentially. Whereas actually, if you say, "Oh, I'm a procurement professional, and I've spent 20 years doing XYZ, and this is the impact that I have," like, actually, the fact that you're not currently employed is not the be all and end all. You're giving people an understanding of your value and kind of the impact that you've had.
And I think, that's another scenario, isn't it, about the identifying and the, attaching all of our self-worth or our identity to the job. Whereas actually it could be that I'm really passionate about doing this. I help people to do that. And, I definitely think that's something. And you know, how many times, do you go and meet someone and then after a couple of nice pleasantries being exchanged, it's a natural question to say, and what do you do then? So it is just around reframing that for yourself to go, okay, I might not be in a desirable position at the moment, but it's not everything that I am. And again, this always comes back to beliefs for me, about believing, having the helpful beliefs and having the not so helpful beliefs, and how we can compartmentalize or to push some beliefs to one side while we work on the ones that we do have that are good about ourselves. So yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, we said at the start of this, it's a complex topic, identity, and it's very multifaceted. I think this has been a good overview as to how it shows up for people in procurement, how it shows up for us as individuals, as business owners, as professionals. And I think, a common theme that I think that goes through all of these episodes that we've done so far is just about how, you always start with self. Start there and start with, well, where am I good? What am I good at? What do I enjoy? Purpose. And then that builds out to your identity.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, I would just echo that, really, to be honest. I think, in terms of a bit of a takeaway for people listening today, I think, again, it's just kind of just check in with yourself and just really have a think about, how is it that how are you feeling about your own identity, and how are you then showcasing that to other people? And do you feel that you fully understand kind of your your identity, or kind of how you're building your personal brand, possibly dependent on the circumstance. But I think just really think about firstly, how do you feel about it? And is there work to be done? Could you could you benefit from delving a bit deeper and understanding and believing kind of what it is you're saying to yourself? And then just kind of think about how is that then conveyed and communicated to others positively.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. So yeah, I definitely a complex topic, but also one that I'd like to pull us through a few threads from, maybe in future episodes. But certainly, I think one of the takeaway I'd like to give from this that I've probably not mentioned is just about the self-compassion. We all have these beliefs. We all have beliefs that are helpful and unhelpful. They're not always spoken about out loud. And we did commit that with this podcast, we'd have conversations that are honest and about, what we hear and what we experience ourselves. Those beliefs exist for us too, right? So it's just about knowing how to navigate them and to not get stuck and trapped in them, really, more than anything.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, thank you everyone for tuning in. It's great to have all of your support, and we're really enjoying this journey. I think we've said it before, but if there are particular topics that you'd love to delve deeper into, like, please do let us know. Like, we'd love to hear your feedback, and we're just at the point of scoping out some of our future episodes. So we would love to hear from you on your thoughts so far and how we can further shape things as we move forward. Thanks so much, everyone.
Right. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Procurement Pivots. We hope today's episode gave you actionable tips to help you to continue to move forward in your procurement career.
If you enjoyed the conversation, follow our episodes, share them with others, and please support us on our social media channels for others that might be interested to tune in.